And I'm gonna be high.
Good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man, yeah.
I'm a rocket man. And I'm gonna be
Rocket Man.
I'm a rocket man.
Thanks for coming on the show here, Ken Adamo. We've got another episode of Let's Talk Logistics. You probably don't need an introduction in freight, but you are the Chief Analytics Officer at DAT Solutions. Give me a breakdown of what you do at DAT, and we'll just go from there.
I've actually got a super interesting job. So I'm Chief of Analytics over here. So I head up all of our analytics and data science teams, which has grown during my time here. But about a year ago, I also took over corp development and partnerships. So buying companies, organic development, biz dev, all of that fun stuff. So it's been
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a really cool part of the job. So we got to oversee it. We could talk about this as we get rolling, but one of our first things that we looked at was trucker tools. So we were able to do that, and we're looking at a bunch of stuff right now. The market's obviously super active, but yeah, it's been super fun. A little bit different for me.
So you're a data guy. What's your background in that? How did you get into data?
Well, I graduated during the Great Financial Crisis and didn't want to be unemployed. So I went and worked for the local utility, which was going through deregulation, essentially from the East Coast all the way to Chicago, and fell in love with analytics. So basically chasing all the deregulating markets, and electricity is, well, all energy for that matter, is an analytics heavy on the retail and wholesale side. And I kind of learned on the job. I went to school with, finance and economics, and, just essentially working with a bunch of super smart people. Learned that those businesses tend to get awful felony-esque after a while, so I got out of there before that happened and went to FedEx, and then kind of took all that learning to freight, which is surprisingly similar to electricity, like shockingly similar, pun intended.
I suppose if you look at the data, it is. Yeah, you wouldn't think so on the surface of the industries.
Yeah, it's a non-storable commodity, right? So it's a really interesting proxy, and to the extent that I've had any success in this industry, it's been taking some of those concepts of how to price electricity and bringing it to freight and logistics.
Okay. And for the folks out there who maybe aren't as familiar with what DAT does, they just know it's a load board. What's your best synopsis of what DAT does in the market?
I mean, I think the best marketing way to say it is we're the largest freight marketplace in North America, perhaps the world. But yeah, I think we have the load board business. I was brought on board over 5 years ago to build the analytics business into a more prominent piece of our overall portfolio. Proud to say, as a team, we 5X'd that since I joined. I'm no longer as much involved on the product and tech side, a little bit through the analytics and data science piece, but bounced around into product and tech roles over that time period, but largely just being a data evangelist, if you will, for DAT, really grew that business to prominence. And then we just acquired Trucker Tools, which is transportation visibility, so track and trace and all that fun stuff. But we believe that our core markets are helping brokers, carriers, and shippers facilitate transactions in that spot and contract market for freight.
There it is. We'll have to clip that one right there. That was well said. So break down for me, since you started as the, I guess maybe the rate product or analytics side with the analytics business 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. What's the value, or what does DAT do, and how does it get its rate products? It comes from brokers, I assume, or carriers. I'm really not that well versed in it, but my synopsis of it, or as like a layman, right? I don't do much truckload brokerage, and I don't use DAT very often in my role. But you post a load, you got to figure out what to quote the customer. So there's a load product and there's a rate product. How do you guys get the rates? Or how accurate are they? How do you look at trends? And there's lots of noise in the market about rates, and that's my kind of warm-up question, is like, how do you even get them? And then we'll talk about like what's coming and where the data's from and what's to trust.
Yeah. This was always surprising to me, even joining, because a lot of people don't think to ask. There's a lot of mysticism and skepticism about how DAT gets its rates, and I mean the short answer is that our customers send it to us. And so, we collect it from shippers, brokers, and carriers. When I joined, the database was much more broker tilted, but we acquired FMIC from Chainalytics in 2020. And since then, it's been much more balanced. I don't know the exact number, and it ebbs and flows depending on how much is moving spot versus contract. But it's probably 60-ish% spot, which comes from brokers and carriers, and 40 to 45-ish% contract, which means when it comes from shippers. But yeah, most of it's coming out of a TMS. One of our flagship products is a 7-day average, and I think. Look, I love competitive spirit more than anyone. So, like, the main dig is like, what's 7 days old? Well, it's like, well, that's actually not true. Like, 1/7 of it is 7 days old, but like 1/7 of it is also 0 days old.
1/6, 1/5,
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay.
the reason we do that actually is because the day of the week effect is huge in pricing. And if you give someone yesterday's rate, it's really not applicable today because yesterday was Monday, last I checked. And Monday is a much different price than Tuesday.
We're filming on a Tuesday, for
yeah,
sure.
so we're filming on a Tuesday. So, yeah, the data comes in. Most of it's from TMSs. I'd say ballpark math on the spot side, 75% of the data comes in within hours of being booked in the TMS, no later than that night. So,
Okay.
yeah, there's like at a certain point, like, I don't know. One of my challenges as a leader has been like early in my career, even at DAT, like going off like hellfire on every competitive thing that's said about you. At the end of the day, it's like, as a market leader, you just like, I don't know. The data's not lagged, and if someone wants to say that it is, I don't need to like create a flow chart and go on LinkedIn and explain how it's not. The customers who are paying for it know that it's not. So that's really what's important.
Yeah, and I think that the reason that there's so much, I guess I would say, hype around all of that talk and competitors and the rates and how they get them or how you guys procure it, but also how fresh it is and how accurate is because since I've started Rocket in 2020, almost 5 years ago, the market's flipped so many times. Now everybody seems to be hinging on what's going to happen with rates, and they looked at DAT and maybe Sonar and maybe others to say, hey, tell me what the rates are going to be. And everybody uses these different indices. But I mean, DAT obviously is the largest. That doesn't have to be said, but just in case someone listening is maybe not in the freight industry, DAT is the largest load board marketplace. So you have the most data. And you guys are putting out data. Can we dig into, maybe I'll bounce around a little bit, but can we dig into what happened in February with data? Like, it seemed to be recovering in December from what I can judge. And then rates have gone back down. Do you see that? That's just me looking on Twitter.
Yeah.
And obviously I do some research.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's like two things. I think I could like tie the first question and this one together a little bit. And that's because I think there's two things that sets us apart that I think honestly drives some of the competition mad because it's like so hard to crack because you can't really have an accuracy conversation because averages aren't accurate. They just are what they are, right? So like,
yeah.
If I say like the average male height
They're a
is
trend.
Yeah, the average male height is 6 feet tall. You can't say, well, that's inaccurate. So either you do or you don't know how to do math, right? But like pointing to an example of a 7-foot man doesn't make the average not 6 feet, right? So it's the fact that it's not arbitrary, that it is kind of, it stands on what it is. And two is its ubiquity. And what I mean by that is we're the only analytics platform that also has millions of transactions happening every day with visibility into these different rating and analytics tools like load to truck ratio and rates and all of that. So, a lot of newer companies, they can't just like upstart a multi-million person network that's transacting every single day. So yeah, we saw it. There was actually a little bit, some of the Twitter kerfuffle was like there was actually a problem with one of the data providers that my guess is the EIA changed the day that they report fuel, almost the exact week. And it looks like one of those rating products dropped their fuel adder. So that was just a technical glitch. But in all seriousness, like rates were recovering and then they stopped, which makes total sense, right? Like our market loves volatility, but this is too much volatility. Anyone you know, this is too much. And so, yeah, I think it's really stopped the recovery. Rates haven't stopped going up, though. It's just maybe the seasonality is underperforming, but rates haven't fallen off a cliff. It's just They haven't gone up as much.
Okay, so that's interesting. So if you just listen to the noise, you think rates have fallen off a cliff, but you're saying they're just not pacing with maybe the seasonality. They're not going down necessarily.
Yeah, and again, that's on a holistic view. If you're a drayage provider
Yeah.
on the West Coast, you're
Out of Long
yeah,
Beach.
you're screwed, right? Like there's no, not to make
For
light
right
of
now,
it, but you're
yeah.
probably home right now. So, yeah, I think on the bias, a lot of folks were really, really hoping for recovery right now, and it was looking that, especially in flatbed, we were like off on a tear, and then almost to the day that the tariff, like Liberation Day hit, it just hit a wall.
And do you think that, I mean, explain that for me as best as you can. Flatbed was more affected and was such a sharp drop on Liberation Day. And it wasn't from the Mexico-Canada tariffs, which I would have assumed would have had a bigger impact on it back in February when they were talking about the 25% tariffs there.
Yeah.
Because when I think of China tariffs, I think of drayage and Long Beach. But flatbed rates did nosedive. And I posted on Twitter today, or X, what should I ask Ken? And somebody at Charm said, hey, ask him about the flatbed rates and what happened there.
Yeah, I think there's a data thing going on there because that's not what any other major provider is showing. I can't imagine that the company in question has a ton of flatbed data. I don't know what's going on there. That's not what's showing in like the main signal of any other provider.
Okay.
It's just kind of like, it
On that
literally
example.
hit a wall. Like it was climbing. Look, I was posting about it. Everyone was like, brokers were posting about it, shippers were posting about it, and then it just like literally like the Roadrunner and the Wile E. Coyote things, just like
Just stopped going up.
went flat. Well, what happens there is like flatbed's very sensitive to a couple core markets, industrial materials like coiled steel and stuff, which were largely singled out with some of the North American and international tariffs, and then energy. As you know, many of us who drive large vehicles with lots of kids are happy to see energy prices down right now, but that does tend to drag pretty heavily on flatbed.
Yeah, I guess it's a downstream of that.
Yeah, so again, it's not. I would say flatbed is honestly performing the best of the three equipment types right now, but it had so much promise, and it was looking very much like a 2018 bull run because like new housing starts were starting to trend positive, interest rates were coming down, all of the things like
Yeah.
and then
And then Liberation Day and all of the chaos after and all of the
Yeah.
maybe it's much to do about nothing, but for sure the China tariffs, if they stay for much longer, I mean, I like to think that it's not going to affect anything long term as long as it gets resolved in May. I might be wrong about that even. But short term, it's a pretty bleak outlook if you're in the e-commerce industry, rocket shipping. If you are a drayage provider, if you're trying to run truckload to the West Coast from the Midwest, the rate, it's kind of interesting. I had to explain to a couple of clients that the rate going out to the West Coast was higher, but they pushed back and said, no, I've heard the truckload market rates are going down. And I said, yeah, but specifically no one wants to land in California. They might not get back out. They're taking it for $1 a mile on the way out.
Yeah. That's the localization. The problem becomes no one knows what the new normal is going to be. And so you don't want to be the schmuck who, sent the last truckload out that's going to get whacked with the tariff, or the last, container load of freight that's going to get whacked.
Container that'll hit the tariff.
But then you can't wait forever, right? Because you've got back to school and all of these things that have very long lead times. So I agree with you that May is going to be kind of the proving ground of what the rest of the year looks like. I don't know. I don't think this is a scenario. I tend to not chime in on things that I'm not super well versed in, but I just don't, just from my experience doing a bit of international air freight and whatnot, I don't think China's going to blink here. But we'll see.
Yeah. I actually don't know, and I haven't looked into it enough to even have a real opinion. I hope they do, because I have many interests in it being a good trade relationship between China and the US, but I also, part of me or most of me is like, hey, I think that manufacturing should come back where it makes sense. And I do agree with some of the trend. Don't know about the methods. But I have a lot of clients. Rocket Shipping serves a lot of clients that buy stuff from overseas and drop ship online, and it's got to get here to go LTL and final mile.
Yeah.
And talking to most of my clients, they're just not, they have inventory and they have no sailings. Nothing's coming because they are hoping that, and they don't have the option. E-com brands don't have the option really to snatch up the in-bonded warehouses. Those are the big guys are taking those. So it's not feasible to grab one of those or grab space. So they just are holding the orders.
Yep.
And that'll be an interesting summer for volumes and, payment terms and all of that. That's a very small piece of it, but I'm on the front lines there. Now, I'm going to bounce back. It's still tariff impact. Have you seen, I had Matt Silver from Cargado, and he was talking about Mexico to U.S. What's your opinion on cross-border freight? And do you think that will be where everybody reshores if China doesn't blink? Or what's your take on that?
I just think it's way too early to do that second, third, fourth order derivatives. I think cross-border definitely got hit. I'm much more versed in Canada. I would defer to Matt a bit more on Mexico. We saw Canada volumes go in absolute free fall for several weeks. They've recovered a little bit, but not nearly to the level. I think we take a very, I would argue justifiably so, American-centric view of world trade policies.
Oh, yeah. That's what America does.
Yeah. And so, but I think we have coworkers and, colleagues in Canada, and they're very much not happy with us right now. You go up there for a meeting, and a lot of them are looking at the back of the chips or the cookies that they're eating for their lunch, and they want to see that it's made in Canada. So I think there's a little bit of reciprocal agita happening that I think it's going to take a little while for some of that to remedy from a northern border crossing volume perspective, because the volumes are still considerably off. Now, one tactic, if you talk to some big shippers, mainly on the freight side, not so much the e-commerce side, is to bring things in through Vancouver and Prince Rupert and treat Canada as a safe haven. The rail networks now are such that with some of the mergers, you can get all the way into the American heartland eventually through entering in through Vancouver or Prince Rupert. So
intermodal, yeah.
It's opening up a new
strategy.
world that doesn't exist as much in Mexico. You've still got water level issues in Panama. So I think northern diversions.
You also have a different reality on the ground in Mexico for intermodal and all of that too, that it doesn't exist in Canada. So that makes sense.
Yeah. A lot of times, when I was doing work down there with FedEx, probably a decade or so ago at this point, it's pretty hostile, especially as you get closer and closer to the border. A lot of big shippers, especially the high dollar, semiconductors and whatnot, they'll just fly it over the mountains rather than risk trucking it up.
Yeah,
so
they don't want to take a chance with it.
Yeah. So,
and it's a lot of times I think that people will maybe take what I said on that and say, oh, you don't think that, you think less of Mexico than Canada. Well, it's not just native Mexicans. It's just that's where a lot of people were going to get across the border from all over the world. So that was just kind of an interesting hotbed for a long time.
Yeah, last I checked, and I may stick my foot in my mouth here, but I don't think there's a Canadian cartel presence close to the Canadian border in north of Montana, the same way that there is just south of Laredo. So
yeah, and in Laredo and in Texas, it's all very interesting dynamics.
Yeah, I think it's causing a lot of folks to think about things that they maybe didn't have to think about previously, and that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that part of it is a restructuring and going back to kind of America takes a America-centric or nationalist approach to most of the world. We have since World War I, really.
Back-to-back champs.
Yeah, undefeated so far. Hopefully we don't have a third go at it because, three-peat's pretty difficult. So let's just leave that off the table.
Yeah, I agree.
Competition is fierce. But let's go from that to, did you see, well, actually, this is interesting. The day we're recording, speaking of Canada, Carney, the new prime minister, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it prime minister of Canada?
Correct.
That's what they call him. Carney he's meeting with Trump in the White House. I saw that on X earlier today. And Trump was saying he was going to buy Canada, and he says not for sale, but they did seem to be getting along. I think they said it with a little bit of humor. So hopefully that strengthens, there's a new prime minister, there's less volatility in their election, and now we can settle in. I think Canada could be more of a strategic partner than we realize in this whole trade thing as well. I think most people talk about Mexico, and Canada could be a lot more, because we have leverage and we don't want to subsidize with the tariffs or whatnot. They could help us out in this trade war as well.
I don't disagree. I think a lot of people don't firmly appreciate the level of like housing crisis and affordability crisis that's going on in Canada at the moment.
Yeah, isn't it the median house price is 4 times the median house price of the U.S. right
Yeah, I
now?
don't know the exact stat, but it's like when you watch
saw
House
that.
Hunters, right? It's the old meme of like they want a $900,000 house and they both farm butterflies for a living. It's like I don't know how they're affording it.
Underwater basket weaving and a butterfly farmer.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that again, I don't pretend to be an expert in like northern Canadian politics, but I think like prior to this election, like prior to the tariff spat, I mean they were going to have a pretty wholesale referendum up and down, from Parliament.
Yeah, Pierre Poilievre was like a 70% favorite.
Yeah, and then
suddenly something happened.
Yeah, something happened. And so we'll see. I mean, I don't I think the core of what we do is largely unaffected by a lot of this, right? I think even if you're an e-commerce sensitive business, this doesn't apply to you, but I think like by and by, the reason I'm not as bearish on some of the China, Cambodia, Vietnam tariff is because most like long haul over the road trucking is not sensitive to that. And I don't think it's as huge of an impact as it's made out to be. So I think like in like if you have like Craig over here, Craig Fuller over here, and Jason Miller over here, it's like a spectrum of like A to B, like super worried about it and super like violently unworried about it. I'm probably closer to Jason on the overall macro impact of this on the trucking economy.
I didn't know Jason was unworried about it. I hadn't been reading his posts lately. But so is he saying that it won't have the impact in trucking that maybe Craig thinks it will? And Craig, and it's not just Craig. There's a couple of guys. Steven, somebody, he's the founder of Cuts Clothing. They make T-shirts. I guess they make them in China, and they've got a big problem. And then Ridge Wallet, they're on like CNN shouting from the rooftops that it's going to crush all of America.
I mean, I don't think all of America needs a Ridge Wallet, but yeah, I mean, I just think like Jason
or a T-shirt made in China. Like I'm just saying.
Yeah,
I like their businesses, and I like that they built awesome businesses, and they can only play with the cards that are on the field, and that's what they did. But it just doesn't seem to be the same plight as like, hey, we can't get penicillin. Like that might be a real problem.
That'd be a problem. Yeah, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth because I greatly respect both of the folks, Craig and Jason. But I think this kind of started with Craig saying that like a moderate tariff policy would be good, and then Jason said no, that would be bad. That'd be inflationary, and then Jason basically said no, it would be bad, and so they were kind of at odds over that. And then I think like Craig was like got into the too much of a good thing mode where it's like, too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
And now it's a bad thing. So too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Just like, excess is not good. And so I think, again, I think Craig's been pretty well on the record saying moderate tariffs would have been good, but 145%, 200% is not good.
Yeah. And then I guess I did see Jason the other day did post and said, hey, I'm glad FreightWaves came to my position on this and came full circle. So that's a little interesting.
He's a tenured academic. He kind of says whatever I think he wants to say. He doesn't really have to worry about too much.
He definitely does. I don't know if you saw, I made fun of his mustache.
Yeah, it's a savage
week,
mustache. Well, he's a Buckeye. Went to teach at Michigan State, so he gets a little bit of grace.
Wait, he went to Michigan State, but not Michigan, right? So then he wouldn't get any grace for that.
Well, he got his PhD
I was just
at
making
Ohio
sure where's your red line? Is it Michigan
State
or Michigan
is
State?
cool. I don't have really a problem with them, but yeah, it's Michigan. But yeah, he got his PhD at Ohio State.
You got an event coming up, don't you? With Craig and I don't know if Jason will be there. Is that the fraud symposium?
Yeah, we've got someone going
to
that. It's in Texas, I think.
Okay. Yeah,
that should
I thought
be
I saw that being advertised somewhere. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's pivot a little bit. Ken Adamo, what's your official title? Chief Analytics Officer?
Chief of Analytics, and then Head of Corporate Development.
Okay, I want to talk about acquisitions.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Trucker Tools. I want to talk about Carrie Jablonski. Not specifically. It wouldn't be fair to talk about her unless she's on the show. But like the fact that was acquired by DAT. First take, tough question. Was that defense or offense?
Very much offense. It's so clicking back a little bit. So Roper is our parent company. They're kind of the lesser known, kind of a Berkshire Hathaway-esque holding company. They divested almost all of their industrial companies, 3 or 4 years ago, and they're completely into tech. Tech and medical. Essentially, the only hardware businesses are kind of medical or tech enabled. Anyway, for the pretty much the modern history of Roper. They buy large platform companies. Let's call it 2 or 3 a year. DAT could be one of them. They have Construct Connect, which is like the DAT of construction workers and things like that. Well,
Okay.
there's fewer of those to go around, so they're essentially the CEO of Roper, Neil Hunt, has been talking to the investors largely about starting to layer in more what they call bolt-ons or tuck-ins, right? And we're very fortunate to be opportunistic, right? Those tuck-ins, there's obviously a lot more investment criteria that goes into plopping down some change on a company, but fundamentally it has to accelerate the growth of the core business, and Trucker Tools very much does that for us. That one doesn't really even have a side benefit of being defensive because the major players there aren't really coming for DAT's core business, at leite not that I've seen any.
I don't know the industry well enough. Trucker Tools is in the visibility space. I mean, I guess Project 44 is in that space. Four Kites.
Yeah, Macro
I
Point.
don't really know the other players. Macro Point.
And they're too busy kind of like hating each other and suing each other over patent infringement to really worry too much about anything else. So
Project 44 is getting sued or suing everybody.
It's a very litigious group. We didn't really have an appreciation for how litigious the visibility was, but apparently it is. But yeah, it was a cool company. Carrie's amazing. She's been a great. It's like we've worked together for a long time already. We've already placed several of their leaders into key positions and done an integration well ahead of schedule with their team. So yeah, it was a super fun thing to take a peek at and have hit.
And Carrie was hired as CEO of Trucker Tools, right?
I don't think you'd have to ask her the specifics, but I think basically she was hired and then placed as CEO within a few months of those two moves.
Okay. Yeah, actually, I had Jesse Buckingham from Vuma on the show.
Yeah, he was the CEO that hired Carrie, and then I think he left.
Yeah, he was the CEO of a private equity group that hired Carrie and then moved her to CEO. And I had no idea because he's so young. I just assumed that he was in tech, and then he started in freight tech and built AI agents, but he was already in private equity before that.
That's kind of the Alpine model.
Because he's Australian.
They take someone out of an A-tier business school and give them a CEO job very, very quickly, and that's kind of their model. But yeah, Carrie's awesome. The whole team's been great. And yeah, one of the first ones I got a chance to look at in my role hit, which is always a fun, always a fun part of the job.
It's a good quest. You don't want to swing and miss the first time. You lose a little confidence.
It wasn't the first one, to be fair. I can't obviously mention any of them, but we looked at a couple things, and it just didn't. The bar is very, very, very high, right? Roper has returned.
Yeah, you tried to buy Rocket for what was it, $500 million? I just wasn't taking it.
You wanted 700, so we couldn't agree to a price.
Yeah, and I wanted all of it up front, no earn out. It was tough. So
it's a tough deal.
I'm glad that we can still be friends.
It's a tough deal. But yeah, the bar's high. I mean, the Roper's returned something like 18% total shareholder return 6 or 7 years in a row to its shareholders, and they don't do that by taking flyers. So it's a long process. Yeah. It's actually a fast process that feels long because there's so much work, but it's awesome.
All right, here's a tough question you might not be able to answer because you're probably working on it right now, but is that specifically you and DAT in this market, do you just see tons of opportunity to continue doing what you did with Trucker Tools with other brands because they're venture capital backed and they're not going to make it?
Yeah, I don't think it's all that they're not going to make it. It's just they're long in the tooth. So about a year ago, a lot of these VC backed, maybe like Series A, they wanted to raise Series B and they didn't want to take a down round, so they took on venture debt or convertible notes. Their VCs went out. So it's kind of a tent sale in a lot of ways right now for some of these.
There's a lot of VCs in every industry that want out because it's been 10 years since they've capitalized, and the only way to continue to stay in is to take a down round right now.
Yeah. So a lot of what I would call like household freight tech brands are out there being shopped right now. I think a lot of founders are learning the hard way. Like when you went over, the minute you dropped below 50% as a management team or a founder, you don't have the final. Your board's pulling a lot of strings, so it's tough out there. And I think it's also important.
It's
to say,
the toughest out there that it's been. I thought 2023 was tough for VC, but this year's going to be really brutal.
Yeah, especially if you're
because everybody thought they might get to another round where they could at least break even on a B. And it's going to be down rounds or nothing. Or down rounds or convertible. That's all they're doing.
Yeah. So I think you'll start to see a lot of PE, like big swinging PE, start to amalgamate some of these pieces and parts.
If we get interest rate cuts, there could be private credit facilities that go after like the same market and try to compete with PE as well. I think.
Yeah, I think
But
that's a possibility. I think that's always a dangerous proposition. I mean, if you founded something and you love your business, to get like bundled with 3 or 4 other things by a PE or a private credit firm, I don't know. I mean, is that the out that you had hoped for?
no.
Probably not. So,
But it's also maybe better than the alternative of, and what people don't talk about often, and I always appreciate that Tim Hyman at Ascend TMS does. Like, it's not just that you lose 50%, like go to 40%, and so you can't really get all the votes you need to make the decisions you want. That the share ranking, or like the order at which people get paid out in any exit, the founder ends up at the bottom of that pay table, and if they sell for 50, they might get $1 million because the investors might get the first 49. And that's where the founders really are trying to find a way to keep it going longer. Bridge rounds, anything they can. But 2025 would have had to have turned positive, and that would have helped a lot of VC, freight tech, also freight brokerage, and just other industry, visibility, final mile, all those types of companies with VC.
no, I think that's right. It's hard because like those are things that I'd love to spend time on, but frankly, a lot of those companies are in that position because the things that have gotten them into that position kind of make them not a great fit for how I think about what fuels growth. So,
Yeah,
it's
that's 2 completely different strategies: a rule of 40 versus inorganic versus organic. They're all different.
like analytically, I love to wake up in the morning. I get a lot of time zone arbitrage. A lot of my teams on the West Coast are in Mountain Time, so I get to play around in the data. And you might see a tweet mostly in the morning when I find something interesting, or a LinkedIn post to go write about. So I've had to like really get disciplined over this last year about like where I spend my time on the deal front, because you can just get lost in not focusing on the right thing very, very easily. And it's really critically important that I keep telling myself, like, focus on the most important things, what helps us grow our core business, what delights our customers, adds the most value.
Maybe I'll press on that. What does help you grow your core business, you think? What's DAT going to do next?
The easy answer is go like help brokers and carriers play in a contract market more fluidly. That is like the easy answer. And I'm sure that's happened in pitch decks, hundreds of pitch decks of freight tech companies saying that they're going to help with that, with automated negotiation or RFP management or any of those things. But like, the simple answer is, if you can get 1% more contract freight, that makes the spot market 10x bigger at the current trading ratios, right? So
a lot of the brokers in the market now don't know what percent they even run contract versus spot. They're not tracking.
Or like what they're winning and losing in bids, or what they agreed to, or
or if they're secondary, how many times is it getting a tender reject and they actually get that secondary?
Yeah.
Because contract is such a complex, and I've delved into it, which is why I know enough to be dangerous. Contract, you have to be able to do it right in order to succeed, and it's high risk, because if you contract, even if you win, you might lose badly. Because if you contract off of a rate that you then, and capacity flips, and you can't source that same carrier anymore, and then you have to go to spot to cover a contract lane, in a market recovery, you'd get squeezed all the way out.
Oh yeah. The worst text you ever
It's
get.
a dangerous position to be in contract right now if things recovered quickly.
That's the worst job in the industry right now.
If you're covering off a spot.
Yeah. January of 2022 is the best job in logistics to be in pricing. You just didn't know it at the time. Yeah, so I think like that's the easy answer. I think the hard answer is like one of the things again about being disciplined is like there are a lot of attractive markets in freight, because it's the market is so behind any other industry of its size and enormity and complexity. But like, I don't think DAT should go buy a truck wash franchise, even though that's probably an attractive market. There's probably someone making a bunch of money off of truck washes. I don't think that's an area that we should go play in. And so I think it's about, where do you add the most value, and where are you like uniquely positioned? And I think the Trucker Tools acquisition is a great proof point of that. Of like, I don't know, you're in our app looking for loads, or you're in our app looking for trucks. Once you book that load, the requirements around tracking are ever increasing, and
always,
we felt that Trucker Tools had a really, really great technical solution, so it made a ton of sense to be able to offer that to our customers at the kind of point of booking.
Are you guys integrated at this point? I know that that's a tough thing to do
Uh,
when you buy a company and then have to get systems integrated and make it user friendly and actually capitalize on that. How's that going?
so I don't think it's holistically integrated in the way that like that word would typically be used. One of Trucker Tools' superpowers is their ability to integrate quickly with multiple TMSs. So, you know, if a customer comes to us and the TMS that they use or it's homegrown isn't integrated, they're honestly at a much faster speed to integrate than legacy DAT was with that particular system. So it's one of their superpowers. We don't see a ton of volume consummated on platform, right? So there's, a lot of the negotiations are happening on the customer's own bid platforms or kind of their own, like think about Navisphere or Hunt 360 or whatnot. So the pressing need really was more for customer side integration than in platform integration. But that's of course coming.
Makes
We're
sense.
only, it feels like we bought, that company years ago and we're only a quarter into the purchase.
Yeah,
So,
one actual quarter, a fiscal
Yeah,
quarter,
one
of,
quarter
of
in,
growth
so-
or of time.
yeah, there's a lot going on, a lot of competing priorities, but we're jazzed about it.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to pivot here. Who's Ken Adamo? I mean, you went to Michigan State or Michigan University,
No.
University of Michigan, right?
Now, I went to Akron for undergrad. I got my MBA at the Ohio State University. So,
Oh, okay. I just always get those mixed up. I know it's tough.
yeah, so
Ohio State, Michigan.
yeah, defending national champions, I might add. But yeah, it's been fun. Like I said before we started recording, I started in deregulated energy, which, if you think about Enron or any of the other scandals, that's an area that's ripe for misbehaving. So I got out of that at the right time. Was at FedEx for a while, and then came to DAT. I was a FedEx customer. I was a DAT customer at FedEx, and that's what naturally.
And you were pricing over there? You were
Yeah,
pricing at
so
FedEx?
we did pricing for the truckload, asset, non-asset, the specialized, and then we helped LTL with their volume and line haul moves using the DAT data. So by the end of it, I was, pricing hundreds of millions of dollars of loads every year with DAT, which is, it allows you to skip the interview, right?
I'd imagine. It's like, hey, I don't need any training.
Yeah. So, yeah, then I came over here, and it was super fun. It was a super small team when I started, and, we've grown, and it's been a fun ride. Made some acquisitions along the way. We have 2 headquarters now, Denver and Portland. I'm remote, obviously, but yeah, I love it. I'd like to say I love it just as much as when I started, but it's actually more fun because it kind of keeps me on my toes with new adventures on the corp dev side of the house.
Yeah, and you get to post on social media all kinds of cool thoughts and make some people mad and make others feel vindicated in their opinions. So when did you start posting and what led you to do that?
One of the cool things that I would have never anticipated doing is when I joined here, they paired me up with, because I came to know DAT at a more executive level by speaking at their conference. It's something I never thought I'd do. And as you know, probably working with big companies, it took forever to get internal approval. It took almost 2 years to get approval to do that. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know that this was actually a thing that people did. I thought you just worked in an office all day. And so when I came here, they're like, well, we really want you to write white papers. And it was a lot more I probably don't show enough respect and deference to how far the business has come over the time that I've been here. Because when I joined, people didn't even know. It was rate view. It's rate view rates. And now it's the DAT key. There's a more, in analytics as a whole, Sonar didn't really exist. It was kind of in its infancy when I was coming over. Back when DAT and Freightways were still friends. Now we're kind of frenemies, I would say, but we were very much friends.
Yeah, you guys have, you've come half circle.
Yeah, half circle. And it kind of started with longer form content, white papers, industry events, LinkedIn, long, verbose. And then, I don't know, about a year ago, they're like, well, you should get on Twitter. FreightX is kind of popping. And I think it's when Craig started you win a free ticket if you post for a year.
If you post the memes every day. That was one of his best moves, and also now I still hate it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that he did it.
And so, our PR team was like, hey, you should try this. I'm like, do you want me to get fired? And so, thankfully I have handlers to make sure I don't go too far off the rails. But I think it's just a way to connect. With my schedule, I don't mean that to sound pretentious, but just being a busy person, it's hard to sit down and put a lot of cogent thought together for a LinkedIn thing.
Oh, I hear you on that because I want to. And then I always make the mistake of I'll post something and then I'll go back to doing what I was doing. And every once in a while I post something that hits a nerve because I'm just automatically contrarian on everything. I have a mental illness, but I post it and then I leave. Not something you can do on X. LinkedIn, you can, and you can come back and read the comments.
Yeah.
X is fast and furious. It's either now or never. You better reply if you want to get
Yeah.
that conversation had.
The cool thing about the way that I approach it is like I don't care about it. I don't get paid for any of that, right? Like I don't. I mean, it could cause me to stop getting paid, which is always the guardrail. But like, I'm not out there to like curtail or kind of appease one. It's just like it's a way if I see something cool and I can actually share it externally, I might spend a minute or two to pretty it up and then fire it off with my thoughts. Or if I see something ridiculous, chime in here or there. I think the thing that really grinds my gears is that every time this market bottoms out over my decade plus history here in this market, you always have like the grifters and like the just complete fools come out of the woodwork. I can remember the May Day 2020. It was a guy by the name of Rick Santiago, right? This guy that he's all over social media, and he went, he bought a suit, and like people are interviewing, and it turns out he's scamming people out of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I think he ultimately ended up getting like sent to jail somewhere. I mean, it's like it happens every time, and
yeah,
drivers are very impressionable, and they love to believe that someone else is to blame for the market besides supply and demand, and it leads them to being taken advantage of. So I don't know, it's not like a white knight thing.
I think all humans want to blame somebody for any problem.
Sure.
So then it just kind of exacerbates in trucking, because when the market bottoms, there's a lot of pain, and then someone's got to blame somebody.
Yeah, it really burns me up. So that's when
It's really Ken Adamo and Craig Fuller's fault most of the time. You guys cause the market swings with your data manipulation tactics.
Yeah,
obviously.
Some of these people at the NOAA Brain Trust. What's the one that I was colluding with the government flow initiative to manipulate rates downward?
Yeah, I remember that. That was pretty impressive work you did.
Yeah, if I could do that, I promise you I wouldn't be doing this job. I'd be on a beach somewhere right now having a margarita.
You and Howard Lutnick are just sitting in your own little Signal chat, right? Is Signal that everybody got in trouble for?
Yeah, they troubled that. Yeah, they texted the war plans.
Yeah, Mike Waltz is out as his NSA because of that. I think he's still in the administration now. I just saw that. He didn't actually get canned. He got moved. Yeah, so there is a difference with a distinction there.
No, but it's a great way to connect with folks. I think it's a great way to test ideas. Like when I have time, when we're not in like a deal cycle or really knee deep in a project, like I like to test ideas on X and then promote them up to LinkedIn, or even like if it works there, like with the broker transparency thing, I was able to promote it into a long form white paper and offer it up to comment to the FMCSA. So that's kind of how I test ideas on X. I bring them over to LinkedIn if they make sense, and then I kind of promote them into more formal collateral for DAT.
It's a good process. And then for those listening, you've made it, and your appearance or your joining of FreightX was successful because you got a couple of people to make burner accounts of you.
Yeah, I saw that.
And when you have somebody make a burner account, Ken Adamo's burner, I don't know who it was.
I don't know either.
But I remember seeing Ken Adamo's burner, and I didn't read the burner part, and I was like, man, Ken is wild today.
Yeah,
like,
that's
he's going on.
Yeah, that
because it had the DAT logo and everything, and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you get a burner account made of you, I think that means you made it on FreightX.
I think, yeah. But
you haven't made it like Reed. You haven't become internet sensation meme.
You haven't.
Guy at conference.
Yeah,
Once you become guy at conference, then you can talk. But
if I could go to less, actually, this is my year that I've just swore to myself. It's the first time I haven't went to TIA in forever. I'm not going to conferences this year as much as I can avoid it. I went to Manifest. And
neither did I.
I just felt like
this is the first year I haven't gone to that. I spoke at it last year and didn't even go this year because I'm just not doing conferences as much.
Yeah, I'm too busy. My team can handle it, even they are opting not to go because they're like, I've got 10 customer requests and this isn't, and I don't know.
I spend all my time with customers now. That's all I can do. And it's the only thing that matters this year. And I mean, I tweeted this in jest because I don't think it'll be as bad. I'm not sky's falling type of guy ever. But I put that, 25 for logistics providers is just going to be survive 25.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And I think that actually probably rings true for a lot of the brokerages who, their revenue is dependent on getting a certain cost per mile or a certain margin. And like, we can get into this or maybe save it for a different day. But I do think there's going to be, if 25, most people If they just hear the noise, they think rates are falling. They're not falling, but they're not rising, right? So they're flat. And that's bad because it's seasonal and it should be rising in April and May, March, April, May. All types of reasons we could get into. But if margins compress, which you wouldn't normally see in a down cycle, you would just see like cheaper rates, but not necessarily percent margin getting worse. In fact, if you're contracted at a rate and you can hold it with a shipper long enough, you can make more on the spot. But if margins do compress enough, then we're going to see the same thing we saw in 23, where like these ABL lines will get called because the banks are not healthy at the moment either.
Yeah.
And they're going to be much more stringent on their covenants than even they were in 23. And I think that has, and this is just my opinion, but I think it's all connected. Venture capital, the limited partners, private equity, private capital, banking, mortgage. It's all not connected to logistics, but it really is. And those brokerages that rely heavily on ABL lines, which a lot of them do, because that's how you get receivables factoring typically, if you're trying to be hyper growth, that's specifically for hyper growth. That's going to be touch and go all summer. Because if it flips too quickly, let's say Trump makes a deal with China in a week and it's like, oh, it's only 5% tariffs, turn the floodgates on. That's going to crush small to mid-market brokers.
That's actually what I'm more worried about, honestly, is the whipsaw.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
My guess is, I don't know, there's a part of me that I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I think you probably can tell that just from some of my online persona. I just don't like conspiracy theorists as much. But
well, you are a data scientist as well. It tracks. It tracks.
But I do think, like, if you were a conspiracy theorist, it would not be crazy to think that a lot of this was manufactured to slow global trade to a halt so that the short memory of the American consumer can get lulled into forgetting what happened now, and then holy crap, June, July, August, September, there's a line on San Pedro Bay, and their helicopters are out there with the local news photographing all these ships waiting to unload. And I think you're right. Like, that's going to be lumpy, and it's going to be unpleasant, and it's going to probably have some unintended consequences.
I just think that people. And I'm not like the most sophisticated brokerage in the world, and I don't know all the things. But what I can see is that most think that a down market going even deeper into a recession is the worst thing that could happen. And I think that the worst thing that could happen is to have a boomerang of volume up. And for the brokerages, not for the market necessarily, but for the brokerages and the trades, like the ocean container companies would get rich again, but brokerages in the middle will just get squeezed right out. And they don't have cash reserves because it's been 2.5 years since they've been able to actually, stack some bills in the savings account.
Yeah. I mean, recessions don't really mean anything anymore. So I guess I'm less worried about that. And I guess more worried about, we need to see, we've kind of lost the plot collectively. Like, inflation and interest rates were the topic du jour for all macroeconomic discourse in this country for the better part of 12 to 18 months before Liberation Day, before the tariff run up. And I think we've lost the plot a little bit on that. I think, like, easing of interest rates, if things can calm back down and you can start to see home building, home buying, remodeling, auto lending, a lot of those things start to regress back to kind of a longer term growth trajectory. The freight markets will start to become much more healthy and predictable again. I think absent that, if there's still this turmoil in the markets and interest rates, and gold has me freaking out a little bit, right? Like, it's up $200 in the last 2 days. And it's like, well, if that's all happening, then maybe there is a chance that this year, because I've long maintained that the absolute worst case scenario is like this year that looks like the last two. That will be very bad.
The end of the rope. A lot of people are at the end of it, and they have no more to pull.
At some point this year, we need to see a break towards recovery. And we started to see it, and it's still there, I think. It's just kind of lost in the sauce of...
Lost in the noise and the fluctuations. There's outliers right now, but maybe the trend line will come back by September.
Yeah. I hope so.
That'll be interesting.
I hope so.
I hope so, too. I've long held the position that and my only primary concern is running rocket shipping and the employees that I have here and making sure that we stay in business and we're profitable. And like the last couple of years, we've grown significantly, but we would have grown more like 2022. We really had a good year then, but everybody could do it then. And so it actually forced us to build a business that can grow in this market. We have an advantage, I think, if it continues to stay low for a while. But when it recovers, I think everybody will be it'll be easier to get customers. I won't have to worry about my customers paying me on time and extending terms or having all of their containers canceled and just waiting to ship stuff. It felt a lot for us like COVID, because that's what happened in March of 2020. It was like, hey, nothing's moving over here. And I'm like, well, yeah, I was a sales rep. The thing about being commission only seems a little unstable right now.
Yeah,
So
it does.
yeah.
Like I said, we're in a position of stability, which is great. My team is able to kind of not worry about the outside noise and what's going on.
Yeah, it's a big advantage if you can do that.
Not worried about. We're not like desperately trying to get funding. We're not trying to get funding at all. So, yeah, it's we don't lose sight of how fortunate we are, and it's just about delivering for customers. I was listening to the previous episode of this, and I had a little bit of chuckling of like, oh, yeah, we're gonna found this company and we're gonna disrupt DAT, and that's what we're gonna do. It's like, well, cool. It's like neat.
It was said.
Like, I mean, look, if it were that easy, it's like opening up a corner store and you're like, yeah, you know what? We're going to take down Walmart. It's like, cool.
Honestly, I haven't met Sam in person, and we talked about going on the show, and I do wish him the best.
Oh, same.
I think he's so good-natured. But going after the biggest player is very difficult. And so it'll be interesting. I know Jason Miller's going to be involved with some of the data stuff. And I think the market needs more instead of less. That's always my position. And I normally am pretty favorable to the small startup versus Goliath. But I also am realistic. And I'm like, hey, it's a tough task. But maybe speak to a little bit of what you heard in that episode, or maybe not specifically from Sam, but of the market. I mean, Craig is critical sometimes of DAT. If I posted today on FreightX and said, tell me the worst thing you've ever heard about DAT, like there'd be a lot of people that'll complain because they're, carriers or brokers or whatever it is. Everybody gets a bone to pick with DAT. But take the opposite. What's your position on, hey, reputational damage about DAT? What do you think of that when people say, hey, the platform's taking advantage of XYZ? How do you guys combat that?
Yeah, I mean, my leadership style is a very kind of like self-deprecating, humble, like roll up my sleeves. And it was like these people aren't here anymore, so I can kind of talk about it. But like when I finally got a seat at the table here a little bit, I learned from an amazing CEO, OpCo CEO at FedEx, first female CEO in the OpCo and in the entire enterprise. And like when you got promoted, even like to a frontline manager, like 4 times a year, you cooked and served a meal to the teams. You'd walk around with if it was hot outside on a nice day, she'd go to Baskin Robbins and buy 4, 5-gallon things of ice cream, and you'd go scoop them around the ops floor. Or if they were moving a big shipment, like when a new phone would come out, you'd order pizzas and serve them at night for the second and third shift. And it was the sense of like,
leadership, yeah.
We were announcing something big, and like we were going to get breakfast for the offices. And I said, "Oh, we should like all get aprons and serve." I'm like, what do you mean we're going to serve? We don't serve anyone. We're being. I'm like,
wait.
But that was like especially in corp dev, I atoned for a lot of the old DAT, a lot of the bad partnership, not bad, but just kind of like the stuffy partnership, the not delivering on what you said. And it's not so much a sales pitch, because I haven't sold anything since I sold washers and dryers at Sears in college and high school. It's very, very different. Our new CEO is from out of the industry. He's got a great history
Who is it? I just was going to ask that next. That was my follow-up. I don't know who it is.
In the first couple hundred employees at PayPal, and then he went on and helped build Walmart Plus from when they acquired Jet. So big network pedigree, but not freight. Our CPO, or former Nordstrom and Expedia. So it's a lot of new faces. Huge culture shift in the last 2.5 years.
Those are consumer brands. So like that's a different type of leadership when it's a consumer brand and they're all customer only. And so that's a different DAT.
Yeah, huge customer obsession. And like a lot, like you bring Carrie onto the leadership team, who's just like ruthlessly customer obsessed. I'm talking to customers every day. I always have been.
CEO.
So it's a very different. And look, I think like the fraud piece is tough because there's always the law of large numbers where there's going to be the most occurrences happening in the biggest networks. But our teams have been working on it for over a year and a half now. We've made a massive dent in a lot of these different things. But on the other end of the coin, like, we've forced a lot of these companies to evolve in how the tactics they're trying. So it's tough. This industry has been singled out.
They evolve, but yes, they've had to.
Yeah.
What do you think of Flexport? Ryan Peterson just said on X like last week that they did 380,000 loads without one act of theft. He didn't say fraud. He said theft. That was an interesting word choice. So he was specifically talking about theft, and that is the Convoy product, I assume.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Ryan's fascinating to me. I love hearing him speak and, chatting with him. I think
he was just on the All In podcast. That guy's everywhere.
Yeah, I think
it's my favorite podcast.
They've got a really cool solution, and it's a closed. The reason that they're able to do it, I mean, first of all, great tech, great talent. So anchor there. They also have like a closed network. So like C.H. Robinson, J.B. Hunt, they're all going to have better fraud prevention statistics because their network is closed at both ends. When you go to a DAT or a truck stop, those kind of networks are open at both ends, right? We don't have JB Hunt has only JB Hunt loads going to only JB Hunt carriers in their network.
Yeah, that's a different network.
It's a different network than being essentially all brokers and all carriers. So it's a different problem to solve. And I don't want to diminish what they've accomplished because, again, I think tremendous respect for Bill Triegert and Ryan Peterson and what they've accomplished. But it is a different problem they're solving, but they are solving it immaculately well. So
was Bill Driegert at Uber?
He was, I think, employee number 3 at Coyote, and then built Uber Freight, and then went to
Uber Freight. Yeah, I thought so. He's at Flexport now, I guess. Okay, I don't keep up enough. Jeez.
So, I think this will continue to evolve. I think like people need to ground themselves. This isn't an excuse, but like this is an industry that has like the primary source of capacity turns over at 100% per year. So like it's tough. And we have a very poor government agency running enforcement. So the door's wide open. CDL schools, like this isn't a new problem, right? When I was at FedEx, this has been a problem. Somali truck driving schools in Minnesota where they come across the border, and it's not good. I'm not singling out Somalia.
That's where I grew up. I know where that's. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So this industry is, it's gotten worse over the years, no doubt. But I think like tolerance for it, like shippers are pushing down more and more requirements. But again, I can't stress enough. We are pouring a massive amount of resources into it. We think we've made huge progress. We've got a lot of things queued up. I think when the market returns, it will also knock some of this down. I think a lot of this is like crime's down when crime's up when the economy's down. That's like an age-old correlation.
Always, yeah.
There's more robberies,
and the freight economy's down.
Yep. So we're on it. But I think in the broad, when I'm talking to partners, they can feel the difference, and they have no reason to lie to me, right? Like I think in these candid conversations, I've known a lot of these people for a long time. The winds are changing. We've, like I said, new talent, a huge emphasis on culture, bringing in teams like Trucker Tools. But I think it just starts with the customer. We've been doing these things the last couple of years. We call them city blitzes, where we just descend on a city and do like 200 customer visits over 3 days. We'll go to Dallas, Houston, Chicago. And it's just a different look and feel. So I'm excited about it. If you're out there and you're not feeling the love, I'm not hard to find, to quote Deion Sanders. Hit me up and I'm happy. That's like, I don't feel like anything's beneath me as a leader, right? So when someone's having a problem on X or LinkedIn and they message me, I escalate that as quickly as I can to get their problem solved.
Yeah.
So I think
I can tell you're a Midwest guy. I like it. I think that some of the themes that you talked about, and normally on this show, I talk about building a business from scratch, or like the mistakes people make, or hiring, firing, HR. And I could have gone into that with you. You've built a large team, but I really did want to talk about the markets and things that are kind of topical. But a lot of the themes that you talked about are, startup culture themes. And you guys are a massive company. I don't know how big you are, maybe hundreds of millions, but it's not a startup.
Yeah.
I almost threw that in there on purpose, but I think that, if you take some of those themes, you have Carrie, you have new CEOs who like PayPal Mafia. If he was the CEO was from there, and then Expedia. That's kind of an interesting mix. But it is hard to move as a big company. Like you just said a customer blitz and you said 200 in one city, and there's all these brokers are like, we have 180 customers. in the world. So it's like, it's a different thing when you're trying to affect change, and it's the hard change management and effectuating change are the two hardest things. And then you have reputational damage from one truckload that got stolen, but that's not DAT's fault inherently. It's just happened on your platform. So I don't envy that position, but I do think the principles are there.
Yeah, I want to win on merit, not on legacy. And that's like I said, I wish Sam all the best. I wish Craig all the best. I think like I am a hyper competitive person. I want to beat them. And again, I think you give it a little bit of a lighthearted chuckle that like I'm just going to wake up one day and 6 PhDs are going to band together and take down an industry leader. It's like, okay, well, come on, let's go, let's dance. But like I think like that's where, again, I just really appreciated building a better rapport with Craig over the years around like we can respect the hell out of each other and compete every day and want to tear each other's businesses to the ground, right? I think like
I do think that you're frustrating to argue with because you're Midwest. Like it is hard to argue with somebody. Like you talked about being self-deprecating. It's very difficult to stay mad at somebody when in the middle of an X argument they're self-deprecating. It's just like impossible. It disarms people. It's a good tactic and it's actually who you are.
oh, this is
But I will say that it's easy to be mad at people if they keep firing away, but when they're self-deprecating, it's harder to continue the fight.
it is. And you know who wins when two businesses are just like ruthlessly going at each other to innovate is like the customer. The customer always wins, right? Like
Yeah.
it's this competition, I think, that breeds new ideas and innovation, and I'm thankful every day that customers are pushing us to do better. I really, really am. There's companies that have come in the space that have redefined categories and they're pushing us, and I can't be more thankful for that, because this could be an industry very easily, and it was for a very long time, where you just made your money, did what you always did, signed off at 5:00. That was that. You hired who you always hired. They all looked and acted the same, and that was that. And that's not going to be the next 10 to 20 years in our industry, and I'm like immensely grateful for that.
Yeah, for sure. I could have asked more questions about AI, about data. I'm glad that we had time to talk what we did talk about.
Yeah.
I think it was a lot of substance there, and I appreciate the time, Ken. I would go longer. I just have to get to a meeting, and I'm sure you do too. But thanks for making time. Ken, where do people find you? X or LinkedIn? What's your preference there?
LinkedIn, if you have a question or anything like that, you can reach in, and I think it's easier to DM on LinkedIn because you don't have to be connected. X, if you want to just argue about stuff or talk football when it's football season, big Ohio State fan, obviously, or just reach out to me directly. Again, happy to solve any problems you're having, even if it's not in my area. I will make sure you're connected with the right person to solve whatever is happening in your world. So.
Awesome. Thanks for the time. Keep an eye on DAT, Trucker Tools acquisition. Lots of changes coming. I think it'll be good for the industry, and I love the competition with Craig and potentially Sam now. So we'll go from there. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks.